All right. How's everybody doing? This is your professor, Dr. Jace, and this is a video lecture for your second week of the class. Going to take care of a little bit of house cleaning. Then we're going to talk a little bit about open access. I am going to try to definitely keep this under 30 minutes, especially since we just had a live session last week. Hopefully it'll be about 20 minutes or so, but there's no telling. But open access is a big deal in academic publishing these days and in academic libraries. So it's something that we are going to have to cover a little bit. And so we are going to cover it a little bit. Just make sure you all know exactly what that is and what it's about. And yeah, that's pretty much how it's going to roll. First things first, when it comes to housekeeping, we got to talk about some of the things that have been added in the course or have been changed around in the course. So I had to get some help from tech as far as getting my assignment section enabled. It is now enabled, so the assignments and assignment prompts have been moved there except for the white paper prompt. And again, that's because I have not developed the white paper prompt as of yet. We have a few questions on the discussion board about discussions, and so we've got to get into that. Now, first of all, I do want to say this. I said this in my other class for those of you who have me in 7314 right now, but I haven't said it yet in this academic libraries class, so it needs to be said. So one thing that people in my student evaluations were sort of knocking me for last semester was they were saying, hey, it's weird that he'll say something about, he'll address a topic in discussions and then he'll turn right around and he'll talk about something in the videos that he's already talked about on the discussion board. And so there is a method to that madness, so let me get into that right now. So basically what it is that there are people who retain better from reading and there are people who retain better from listening. So the reason why you might see me both say something on a discussion board thread in writing and mention it in the videos is because some of you will retain it better if you see it in the discussion board and read it, and some of you will retain it better if you hear it. So it's not one size fits all. If something is very important, I'm probably going to say it in both places so that you will retain it one way or the other. So there's a method to that madness. Please take that for what it is. Now, as far as the discussion posts, so here's how that's going to go down. So discussion points or participation points actually are worth 15 points. I'm sorry, we don't do percent in this class. So 15 points come from discussion posts. And so what it is you have 5 graded discussion prompts. And you will see those in the discussion board menu. All of the graded prompts have a due date on them. So if you look in the discussion prompts right now and you go down, you'll see some due February 4th and due all these other dates. Those are the required posts. Those are the required prompts. And those are the prompts that are going to be graded. And what you're going to do in order to get your 15 points is you are going to do an initial post on all 5 of the prompts, and you are also going to respond to at least 2 classmates. And that way, with each prompt, you have 1 original post and 2 responses, and that adds to 3 comments at least for each prompt, and you have 5 prompts that will add up to 15 points. So hopefully that's clear. If it's not, let me know and I'll try to explain it further. But one thing that I don't want y'all to do, and this is for your own good, this isn't about Dr. Jace, this is for your own good. One thing that I want you all to do is not let the discussion end there, if that makes sense. So basically what I want you all to do is I'm also going to be adding a bunch of discussion prompts that are optional throughout the semester. There actually is already a discussion prompt that is optional, just the free for all, where y'all can talk about anything and just kind of communicate and interact with each other. But I'm going to be adding probably also what would you do scenarios and things like that throughout the semester that are going to be optional. And I think it will benefit you all to participate in those as well. And the reason for that is that's the way that you're going to communicate, make friends with some of your classmates. And trust me, you probably can't get an appreciation for this right now, but take it from somebody who's been there. The connections that you can be learning, or the connections that you can be establishing right now, I should say, the connections that you can be establishing, they can carry you very far in your career if you know how to network properly. And what I'm trying to do is get you all just kind of introduced to one another. I'm trying to make sure that you all are familiar with one another, trying to make sure that you make friends in this class. My MLS program was an on-campus program, and so I got to interact with my classmates right there on campus in real time, in person. And that ended up being very beneficial to me in my career. And unfortunately, you don't have the same benefit in the online environment. And so I'm trying to make up for that. There's a reason why I conduct this class the way that I conduct it. So I would really like it if you all just take some time to get to know one another. If you live in the same city, if you live in Kansas City and you know other people in Kansas City through this class, maybe invite them out for coffee. Or if you're in Columbia, you're in St. Louis, wherever. I know that's more difficult for those of you who live out of state or who don't live in those metro areas. But especially for those of you who live in the metros, just try to network and try to gain some sort of rapport with your classmates, and that can go very far. You're going to want some of these people to give you inside scoops on some jobs in the future. You're going to possibly want them to write you a letter of recommendation. You're probably going to want to, if you're in the academic libraries, you're going to want to co-present with some people. So this is how this works, y'all. So, take advantage of it. Try to get to know your classmates. Try to network. I would recommend every last one of you get a LinkedIn profile if you don't have one already. I know people are really sketchy about social media. I'm on a lot of social media. I'm on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and LinkedIn. A lot of librarians are on Twitter, but it gets to be kind of a mess, honestly, with Twitter because you have people following and unfollowing. Some librarians will unfollow over the slightest of things. It's weird to me. One librarian I saw on Twitter, she was boasting really that she will unfollow anyone on Twitter that she sees making update videos of themselves on YouTube. It was kind of strange, but that's how she rolls, and people just have really strange reasons for unfollowing people on Twitter. So in order to cut with the drama, I like to recommend LinkedIn. I'm on all of it. So, after this course is done, if you want to hit me up on Twitter, that's fine. But LinkedIn is the safe bet. LinkedIn is the one where you don't get people unfollowing you over something petty and then you're wondering how you offended them, and then it makes things awkward at conferences and all that stuff. Nobody's got time for that. So putting that out there. Okay. Let me pause on that and let's talk about some open access. All right, so the first thing that we need to do is just talk about exactly what open access is. And some of you probably, based on the name, can already take a guess. Open access is pretty much a movement that is trying to it's a movement basically of trying to get rid of these paywalls for certain academic literature, in particular, trying to make it freely accessible so that anyone can use it and so that it can be cited and distributed generally. It's pretty much seen by a lot of people as a public good. For one thing, a lot of scientific research is actually government funded, so it's tax supported. It is tax funded. The people of the United States of America for American research, a lot of times they are the ones who foot the bill for a lot of the academic research that goes on, even if it's at a private institution, if it's somewhere like Duke or Yale or Harvard. A lot of times those schools are getting public grants to do their research at their private institutions. So it's not always a matter of just places like Mizzou, which is a Research One institution, but it's public and therefore taxpayer funded. Even at some of these private institutions that are AAU, Association of American Universities, they are getting public grants in order to fund their research, even if these professors and researchers work at private institutions. So basically, one thing that you have in the publishing game right now when it comes to academic publishing and scholarly publishing is that you have publishers and databases that are proprietary and that are for profit and private, and they are charging the American taxpayer money to access publicly funded research. So a lot of people take note of that and they say, hey, there's an unethical element to this. You know, if this research is funded by the public, then it should be accessible freely to the public. Now, we as libraries, we turn around and we take the public dollars of the people and we gather those public dollars and get the access, buy the access from the databases to that publicly funded research, but it's still publicly funded research. Now, on the flip side of that coin, one thing that the database folks will tell you is that they, well, I don't want to speak for the database folks specifically, but the counter argument is that they are not charging us merely for access to publicly funded stuff, but they are indexing and preserving and cataloging, and so they feel that they are indeed providing a service, because where does all that stuff go if it's not for these proprietary databases? Where does all that stuff go if they're not the ones that are actually indexing it and making it searchable and preserving it and putting the copyright protections on it for the publisher and for the author and so forth and so on? So I'm sure that the vendors would say that they are not merely just selling the American people the access to research funded by the American people. I'm sure that they say that they provide an actual service. So, you know, that's a debate that you all can even possibly hash out in the discussion board. You know, go for it. But what we're going to do now, first of all, just to get an overview of the open access movement. I think the University of North Carolina at Greensboro, where I used to work, you might see me touting these folks a lot. But I do feel that their library has a really, really good webpage describing the open access movement. So we are going to look at that right now. All right. So here we are. And if you want to visit this website yourself, let me move this up just a tad bit here. Web address library.unccg.edu/services/scholarly_communications/open_access.aspx. So you go to that web address and you can get to this page for the open access movement. And so first of all, we have a definition for open access. Open access means providing free access to works through the internet. Open access is primarily for scholarly journal articles. Authors receive no monetary compensation for the work and is not used when authors expect to make money for their works, whether they are producing monographs, textbooks, music, etc. So one thing I do want to, before we go to the rest of what they got written there, one thing that I do want to say is, yes, usually those scholars who provide articles and research to open access journals and other open access sources, they are not looking to get paid much of the time. So you may even be asking yourself, well, hey, if there's no pay incentive, why even do it? And really the reason for that for a lot of scholars is they are trying to get tenure. So if you are on a tenure track process, then one thing that you have to do, you probably all heard the phrase publish or perish, or the saying publish or perish. And if you haven't heard the saying publish or perish, you might want to sort of look that up and familiarize yourself with that, because if you work as an academic librarian, there is a good chance that even if you are not on a tenure track as a librarian, and that varies from academic library to academic library, whether or not you're going to be on a tenure track. But either way, if you do not have some sort of scholarly output or some sort of creative output, then in a lot of academic libraries, you just might not be retained if you have librarian rank, but you are not producing something to the outside. So even and I came here to Mizzou from Coastal Carolina University near Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and they were not a theory shop by any stretch of the imagination. Coastal Carolina is very much a day-to-day operation sort of place, and their outside publishing aspects for getting tenure were not strenuous. It was not like what it takes to get tenure if you are, for instance, a librarian at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, or at North Carolina State University, or one of these places. But even still, the people at Coastal Carolina published and they presented, and they did that so that they would have that piece on their annual review. And all of this stuff will circle in. It's all factored into your annual reviews and into your tenure file if you are on a tenure track. So be mindful of that. And what you want to do is you want to get published, because that is your way to getting tenure. If you don't get published, you don't get your name out there. If you don't have contributions to the greater profession in your role as an academic librarian, then you are putting yourself at risk as far as being retained or getting tenure. So that is the incentive. And I can honestly say I don't think I've written a lot. I've written in peer-reviewed journals. I've written book chapters. I have a book coming out this year. And even in spite of all that, I haven't made a dime off of any of it. This is so that the University of Missouri will say you are contributing to the literature of the profession, and therefore we will keep you. But hopefully they'll keep me. Who knows? And you might say hopefully, or you might say hopefully they'll get rid of me if you don't like me. But, all that to say, I'm not making a dime off of this. I'm not caking off this in any way whatsoever. This is me trying to make sure that I still have a job. Okay? So, Gold Open Access or immediate open access. Gold Open Access means the work is freely available from its initial publication, and a growing trend in scholarly communication is the publication of Gold Open Access journals. Although Gold Open Access means that the articles from such journals are free to readers, the journals are not produced without expenses, and therefore alternative funding models are frequently used. In most cases, costs are covered through article processing fees, foundation sponsorships, in-kind contributions, advertising, or other sources of support. And these funding models are emerging as an alternative to the traditional subscription model. So that's very important. And yes, there are times, I try to avoid publishing anywhere where they are trying to get me to pay some sort of contributor's fee. But there are places where they do have the audacity to do that. There are places where you will be asked to pay to have your stuff printed in a journal. A lot of those places are predatory journals, and you have to kind of keep an you have to keep your eye out on what is and is not a predatory journal, I'm sorry. You have to kind of mind your, be on your P's and Q's about that, because there are those who are trying to take advantage. So remember that. The most prominent business model for gold open access journals is the use of article processing fees. And depending on the journal, these fees range greatly, anywhere from $100 to $3,000. And although the author is responsible for paying the fees, they are frequently paid through grants that finance the original research. Authors are increasingly writing such fees into their grant proposals. So again, this sort of thing is happening. I personally don't like it. I personally don't like the idea of, okay, I worked my ass off in order to produce this research or produce this theory or whatever, and now I'm having to actually hand over money in order to have my work published and shared with the public. It shouldn't be like that. I really do feel that people should be incentivized by their intellectual property. I think that people actually should be making money off of their intellectual property, because I think that that's how you incentivize people actually doing it. But unfortunately, that's not really how the real world works. So this is definitely, if you want to get published and you don't want to pay a processing fee for publishing, then like what you see here, you are probably going to want to write it into a grant in order to make sure that you're not paying that cost out of pocket. Okay. For a description of various business models for gold open access journals, you can see income models for open access, and we might take a look at that. So one thing that you will want to also be mindful of, and this list is growing all the time, there is the Directory of Open Access Journals, DOAJ, and let's actually just take kind of a quick look at that just so you can see what their homepage looks like. This is the Directory of Open Access Journals, and I would love it if you all just want to, if you have the time, I would love for you all to just hop on and just take a look at this. But you've got multiple subjects. You've got it all. You've got law, you've got fine arts, you've got science, political science, language and literature, and should be able to get into these and, ooh, I see languages that I don't know. Let's go back. Okay, let's try law. And there are search capabilities for this, so I recommend, if you have time, maybe just going in there and taking a look, playing around with it, that sort of thing. My goodness. Of course, if I'm not recording a lecture, then everything is going to be topsy-turvy. Let's try this one last time, and let's try it with American history, which I hope will be something that will definitely be written in English. Okay, browse subjects. History America. Oh, good grief. Okay, well, I'm giving up on that right now. So, play with this on your own time. It is a really good thing to know about. But the Directory of Open Access Journals, it lists over 8,000 gold access journals, representing about 10% of the number of peer-reviewed journals that are published. So gold open access journals are still a small but rapidly growing minority of the peer-reviewed journals. The growth trend of gold open access journals will undoubtedly continue in the mind of the people who run the library at the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. Taken as a group, UNCG's free and open access titles receive less usage than Elsevier, which is one of our pay outlets, but more usage than the titles UNCG gets from Cambridge University Press, Oxford, Springer, Wiley, Taylor and Francis, Sage, Emerald, and Mary Ann Liebert. So these are some pretty heavy duty things that are starting to get outdone. You'll see Springer and you'll see Wiley and you'll see Taylor and Francis, Sage and Emerald, all over the place, I assure you. Okay. All right, so we've talked about the gold open access and the processing fees. Now let's talk about green open access. Green open access is delayed, and that means that the work is freely available after an embargo period, usually about 6 months to a year. Green open access archiving is usually achieved by the author posting a personal electronic copy of an article to a disciplinary or institutional repository. So you have those options as well. And when we talk about institutional repositories, if you don't know what that is, I'm actually going to show you the front screen from my dissertation. Let's get back here. Okay, so I am going over 30 minutes. I apologize. Jason Austin Herzberg. So this is Scholar Commons, right? And so Scholar Commons is the institutional repository for the University of South Carolina. This is my dissertation. It's been downloaded 494 times since September of 2017. I'm sure 450 of those downloads were by me, just so I could boast my stats, because you know how I do. Y'all know how I do. But this is an institutional repository, and institutional repositories give scholars the opportunity to actually have their work put into their institutions, into a database run by their institution, so that everyone within their institution can access their work freely. And a lot of times, including with what you see here at the University of South Carolina, this also extends to the outside world. So you do not have to be affiliated with the University of South Carolina. Excuse me. You do not have to be affiliated with the University of South Carolina in order to access my dissertation or the dissertations of my of the people that I finished library school with, or who did any sort of ever since this institutional repository was created. Anything that's been contributed to it, unless the person who created the work, who produced the research, has put some sort of embargo on it, or their department has, if it goes into the Scholar Commons for the University of South Carolina, anyone can Google it and get to it. And that's why I have so many downloads. So trust me, if this was just in like the thesis and dissertations, I think it's thesis and dissertation abstracts, if it was just in that database, then I wouldn't have close to 500 downloads. I would probably have 15 to 20 downloads at the most. So this open access really does make a big difference. And any one of you can even go on Google, type my name in, and then type Herzberg, and this will pop up, and you can download it, and it'll just be there. Okay? So a lot of times with green open access, now this doesn't affect me because this was a dissertation, but there are professors who put their journal articles that have appeared in peer-reviewed journals. They'll take those after maybe a year or 2 years or whatever embargo period that the journal has exclusive rights to the work. After that time is done, if that time is done, and it'll depend on a contract, but after that time is done, a lot of times those professors will put those works into the institutional repository as well. And so that would be green open access if there's an embargo period first, and then you can do stuff with it after the embargo period is over. If you are familiar with academia.edu, or if you're familiar with ResearchGate, those are also places where scholars can put their work free of charge and have it accessible to the general public. But you may have to create an account within academia.edu or ResearchGate. Those accounts are free. I have those. I have accounts to both, so I can go in and look at that sort of stuff. Okay. So, and then there are disciplinary repositories. So you may have like the NIH public access. PubMed is one of those PubMed Central. It should be. I'm sorry, because I think there are various versions of PubMed. And then we get that. But a lot of that stuff that you'll see on PubMed, that is discipline. PubMed can qualify as a disciplinary repository, and so you will have all sorts of health and medicine stuff on there that is accessible openly and is not behind a paywall, and it's scholars from institutions all over the place, but they are all contributing to the discipline of health and medicine. And then, like I said, you have institutional repositories where a particular school may have a Scholar Commons where everyone can come in and just access the works of that school. They have NC Docs that is it's a consortia down in North Carolina, and UNCG is part of that consortium. Okay. So one thing that I want to do now is talk about the pros and cons to open access. So let's do that. Okay, so maybe just 5 to 10 minutes more of talking about some pros and cons here. These are going to be overview pros and cons, by the way, so there's no need for me to tax you too much. You've already got readings and everything else to do. So there's no need for me to tax you too much on getting specific with these pros and cons. We're just going to have some of the overview pros and cons that you can find freely on the web. If you really want to get in depth with it, of course, you can go into some of the academic databases and find academic journals where the pros and cons are discussed. You can probably even read books about it and that sort of thing. But right now, we're trying to fit a little bit into class, so we are going to do this in sort of a concise way. Okay, so what are our pros and our cons? So, and this is very recent, December the 5th of 2017. It's just over a year old. So, what is open access? It's the free and immediate online availability of research and the rights to use it in a digital environment. With nearly half of all recent published journal articles freely available online, some researchers suggest that open access may be the next academic bubble to burst. So isn't that scary? A recent analysis shows that nearly 19 million journal articles are now open access, and that those publications earn a minimum of 18% more citations than articles that are not open access. So what's the debate? Let's take a closer look at the pros and cons of open access and see why it might just be the next bubble to burst. Now, we do have some bias here, as you can see. So might it be the next bubble to burst? Maybe. But pretty much anything in higher education I've seen can be the next bubble to burst. So let's not get too scared just based on that intro. But let's keep reading. So what are our pros to open access? Well, you have wide dissemination. Perhaps the greatest benefit to open access is that more people can read the results of academic research, including those who wouldn't ordinarily have access to it because of cost or opportunity. And this includes even, by the way, I did want to just point this out. I've worked with international students, and in my PhD program, several of my colleagues were actually in my PhD cohort. I think only two out of 8 of us were American, and then everyone else, no, 3 out of 8 were American, and then the other 5 were from overseas, Iran, Russia, China, England, and Bangladesh. So, you know, when you put all that out there, just saying, like, there are some countries where, well, for one thing, there are some developing nations where intellectual property enforcement just can't be high on the totem pole of law enforcement because there are so many issues in those nations. But then a lot of those people also don't, those are places maybe where even air conditioning and things like that are seen as luxuries. So when you get to things like access to academic literature, that's really low on the totem pole. But open access is good, especially for allowing some of these people overseas to see some of the good work that is produced, and they do not have to be restricted by paywalls and that sort of thing. Open access means that people in developing nations a lot of times can access this information, and it can be useful to them as well. Let me get back into the minimals here. With wider dissemination of academic research comes new ideas for new studies and immediate use in teaching. And again, that has international implications. Open access isn't just limited to the academic world either. Businesses may benefit, and that can create economic impact. Speedy publication, there's no longer paperweight with open access. Paperweight sometimes an academic research article does not actually get published until even 2.5 years after it's submitted. The open access format is attractive to researchers who want to cut time on the peer review process and get straight to the publication. One of the biggest factors contributing to paperweight time is peer review, and compared to traditional publishing, open access journals have a shorter wait time between acceptance and publication. They're talking about access in developing countries. So yes, we've already talked about that. That is a pro. Cons. Expensive for researchers. While you, the reader, don't have to pay anything for open access, a lot of times there is a burden shift to the authors. And so, again, we discussed that earlier. That's something that, again, I think we're in a very dangerous situation if we do not incentivize people who produce intellectual property with payment. If you are actually having to pay to produce intellectual property, then you're really getting into some dicey territory there. Okay. Quality concerns, this is the biggie. Can't you see? Sometimes your words just hypnotize me. Quality concerns. While concerns about the quality of open access research are dwindling, it's still an issue. Results from a survey in 2014 by Nature Publishing Group and Palgrave Macmillan, who I've never heard of, found that 41% of humanities, business, and social science academics were concerned about the quality of publishing in open access publications. Journal reputation far outweighs an article's open access status, but the sped up publication process without a thorough peer review makes some academics nervous. And just because something is open access doesn't mean that the peer review isn't thorough. But when you have a proprietary journal, and they are not wanting, if you have a type of journal that people pay for access for, then they are definitely not going to want to put their reputation on the line and do anything that would make libraries and other outlets hesitant to subscribe and pay for that access. But that sort of payment issue is not the same in the open access arena. Okay. A survey found that 97% of the more than 21,000 authors surveyed said that a journal's reputation and the number of citations were most important when it came to publication. And that's especially if you're at a Research One institution. If you're at Missouri, I got my master's degree from North Carolina Central, which is not an R1. And so publishing in lower tier journals at North Carolina Central wouldn't be as much of a problem, but at Mizzou, they want you in the best journals. Okay. And then a third con that we will talk about is that authors, financial issues for journals. If authors can't pay, but the research warrants publication in an open access journal, then the journal has to bear the brunt of the cost. Traditionally, journal subscriptions funded for the cost of disseminating research, but that method is no longer sustainable because of open access. Okay, so we've already talked about gold access and green access and that sort of thing. And one thing with green access is that it should theoretically make it possible for, or make it plausible for journals that require some sort of pay to have exclusive rights for a certain amount of time. But again, you're getting into dicey territory because journals aren't like news. With news, you want the latest developing story, and you want it within the day or within the week at the most. But with journals, with journal research, um, you have a 2-year embargo on journal research. How much is that affecting you, really? If scientific research that is 3 years old is still considered pretty new. It's not, whereas if you had a newspaper article about the Obama presidency from 2016, something he did on some day in January 2016, that's not the same as having academic research from 2016. That sort of thing is still probably, if it has not been discredited, it is still pertinent and still current. So those are some of the concerns that you have to look at when it comes to open access. So I say all that to give you a little taste, a little tidbit of open access and what it's about, but you would be very wise to learn more and more about it. And there is going to be probably a little bit of coverage on it within the scholarly communications portion of this course. But I wanted to go ahead and talk about it. Now it's one of those things that people are very interested in, and employers are very interested in. So I thought it was a good idea to go ahead and get you all acquainted with it. Keep it in mind as something to think about as you are looking for jobs, if you are looking for an academic librarian job. Okay. That'll do it for me. We're at 43 minutes, it looks like. So I've talked long enough. Thank you all for your attention, and good luck with readings, and thank you for being a great class.